In clinical studies, men in their 50s report craving emotional safety nearly twice as much as sexual novelty, yet only 1 in 5 women over 50 know this. For decades, we've been told that men desire excitement and variety when in fact their deepest longing is biological, a state of safety, calm, and mutual presence that quiets the nervous system and deepens connection. I'm Dr. Eliza Hart, a gynecologist and hormone specialist with over 15 years of clinical experience, helping women understand how hormonal changes after menopause reshape intimacy. What fades with age isn't affection, it's hormonal rhythm. When estrogen and oxytocin fall while men's emotional regulation hormones decline, the result is not rejection, but biochemical misalignment. Both partners start to feel distant without knowing why. Medical data shows that women's estrogen and oxytocin can drop by more than half after 50, while men experience slower testosterone loss, but a sharper decrease in mood-regulating compounds. This imbalance weakens bonding chemistry, the hormonal feedback that makes affection feel rewarding, and that can be corrected once we understand its biology. In today's video, we'll explore 5 biological and psychological responses that men truly crave, grounded in real research, not online advice. If this resonates with you, type 1 in the comments so I know it helped. And please subscribe and turn on the bell. Help me reach 10,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing science-based insights that empower women to reclaim connection, confidence, and vitality after 50. 1. The oxytocin response. Why emotional safety reawakens desire. Among all the hormonal systems that influence connection, oxytocin remains the most powerful and misunderstood. Often called the bonding hormone, it governs far more than affection. It directly moderates blood pressure, stress hormones, and even sexual arousal. When oxytocin levels fall after menopause, both partners feel the difference even if they cannot name it. Touch becomes rarer, conversation shorter, and what used to feel effortless starts requiring intention. In men, oxytocin works in close partnership with testosterone. While testosterone drives motivation and physical readiness, oxytocin determines whether that energy is expressed as tension or tenderness. In a balanced system, oxytocin calms. The sympathetic nervous response lowers cortisol and signals to the brain that closeness is safe. When that signal weakens, as it often does when estrogen drops in women, the entire feedback loop between two nervous systems begins to misfire. Men unconsciously register less emotional reassurance, and their stress chemistry rises instead of settling. Clinical endocrinology now describes intimacy not as a behavioral pattern but as a neurochemical dialogue. When two bodies synchronize breathing, share slow eye contact, or remain in sustained physical proximity, oxytocin pulses rise in both. This increase simultaneously lowers heart rate and elevates nitric oxide release, improving blood flow not only to the brain but also to the pelvic region. That is why couples who cultivate calm, steady presence often report renewed sensitivity, even without focusing on performance. Women sometimes assume this change requires youth or new stimulation, but physiology disagrees. The mature body is still perfectly capable of producing oxytocin. It simply needs the right biological triggers: unhurried rhythm, consistent touch, and the absence of stress hormones that block release. Studies in the Journal of Sexual Medicine have shown that couples practicing intentional stillness and prolonged affectionate contact exhibit oxytocin levels comparable to much younger adults, along with lower inflammatory markers and improved emotional regulation. Understanding this mechanism reframes how we define attraction. Desire is not a spark that disappears with age. It is a hormonal conversation that can lose fluency when the body forgets safety. Restoring it begins not with effort, but with calm, slow breathing, before contact, gentle pressure, rather than intensity and deliberate eye contact that allows both nervous systems to reset. The goal is not to recreate excitement through novelty, but to let the body rediscover stability as its natural source of pleasure. When a woman cultivates that atmosphere, her partner's physiology mirrors it within minutes. Blood pressure drops, muscle tension softens, and dopamine release shifts from performance to connection. This is the quiet start of renewal, where intimacy stops being an act and becomes a regulation of shared biology. In the next section, we'll look at how that same stability evolves into presence and why stillness, not motion, is often the most powerful catalyst for desire after 50. 2. The stillness effect. How calm strengthens arousal. Once safety is reestablished, the next transformation begins with stillness, the quiet physiological state where movement slows and attention expands. Contrary to what many believe, the body often perceives stillness as intimacy, not absence. When activity decreases and breathing aligns, the parasympathetic nervous system takes the lead, allowing the body to shift from vigilance to openness. And this transition is what converts calm into desire. Stillness activates the vagus nerve, which connects the brain to nearly every major organ. When the vagus nerve is engaged through steady breathing or gentle pauses, the heart rate slows, blood flow redistributes toward the skin and pelvic region, and both partners enter a synchronized physiological rhythm. So sensitivity increases, while anxiety decreases, creating the internal environment where affection can become arousal without effort. Neuroscience confirms that anticipation is heightened in the absence of rapid motion. When we slow down, the brain releases acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter that enhances sensory awareness, which explains why during moments of stillness, touch feels amplified. Breathing sounds louder, and eye contact becomes magnetic because the body begins to listen more deeply once it is no longer rushing to act. In women after 50, this response is particularly beneficial. As estrogen declines, the nervous system tends to remain in a higher stress baseline that suppresses both oxytocin and blood flow to erogenous zones. Whereas practicing calm presence, even brief moments of stillness before intimacy, counteracts that imbalance by lowering cortisol and restoring parasympathetic dominance. So over time, these quiet intervals retrain the body to associate peace with pleasure rather than with restlessness. I often remind my patients that stillness is not withdrawal, but a form of awareness that allows both partners to read subtle cues, the rhythm of breath, the temperature of skin, the tone of voice with greater accuracy. That heightened perception makes connection feel more authentic because the nervous system interprets attunement as safety and safety as attraction. A controlled trial from Harvard Health demonstrated that couples who practiced 5 minutes of synchronized breathing daily showed significant increases in vagal tone and oxytocin within 6 weeks, and their reported emotional satisfaction rose by nearly 40%, not because they moved more, but because they moved together. Measured gains included steadier resting heart rate, improved sleep onset, and fewer reports of dryness, suggesting better autonomic balance and pelvic blood flow without medications or strenuous techniques over time. The stillness effect teaches that passion is not found in speed, but in presence. When a woman allows herself to pause, she communicates confidence. And when a man senses that calm, his body relaxes into attunement, creating the quiet alignment, not performance, that sustains desire long after novelty fades. And in the next section, we will examine how timing and anticipation engage the brain's reward circuit to make connection feel stronger and more electric. 3. The anticipation mechanism. How timing intensifies arousal. After calm takes root, the body begins to rediscover movement in a new way through timing and anticipation. This phase is not about restraint, but about allowing the brain's reward system to build momentum instead of rushing to completion. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation and pleasure, rises most sharply, not during satisfaction itself, but in the seconds leading up to it. When interaction slows, that window expands, and the body interprets waiting as excitement rather than frustration. Clinical studies published in Nature Neuroscience show that anticipation activates the ventral striatum and prefrontal cortex areas linked to emotional focus and pleasure perception. For couples over 50, this process becomes even more valuable because dopamine receptors become less responsive with age. When you prolong the pace, whether through slower breathing, longer pauses, or delayed contact, you give these neural circuits time to recharge, making the eventual release feel fuller and more satisfying. Many women in my clinic assume that slowing down diminishes desire, yet the opposite is true. The mature brain benefits from prolonged anticipation because it rebalances dopamine with oxytocin, shifting arousal from performance to connection. This gradual tempo also reduces stress hormones, allowing both partners to remain fully present. Instead of reacting, you begin to sense, and the nervous system translates that patience into depth. From a psychological perspective, anticipation quiets self-consciousness. Without the pressure to perform, the prefrontal cortex relaxes, mirror neurons engage, and empathy increases. Both partners start reading subtle cues, breath-tone movement with greater sensitivity. The body becomes fluent in a slower language of pleasure that feels more grounded and authentic. This concept extends far beyond the bedroom. Learning to wait to notice micro changes in the other person's energy builds emotional literacy that strengthens communication everywhere else. Even outside of intimacy, couples who practice mindful timing show better stress recovery, lower blood pressure, and improved emotional coherence during conflict. In short, timing trains empathy because the body learns to listen before it reacts. And here's something most people overlook when anticipation becomes part of your rhythm. It subtly reshapes how your partner's brain associates you with pleasure. Neuroimaging shows that consistent anticipation increases dopamine spikes in future interactions, meaning he begins to crave your presence, even outside physical moments. You become, quite literally, the person his brain links with reward and calm. If you've noticed that slowing your pace, whether in affection or conversation, changes the way you feel, share your experience below. Type yes. If patience ever made connection deeper for you or no. If you're still learning how to find that rhythm. Your comments help other women recognize that this stage of life is not about loss, but about learning a new tempo of intimacy that the younger brain never had the wisdom to understand. In the next section, we'll explore how perception and sensory feedback shape emotional safety and why what we see and feel often decides how deeply we connect. 4. The sensory loop. How perception deepens emotional safety. Every form of intimacy, whether physical or emotional, relies on perception. What the brain senses, it interprets, and that interpretation determines whether we feel safe or distant. Neuroscientists call this the sensory emotional loop, the continuous exchange between what your skin feels, what your eyes perceive, and how your nervous system decides if you can relax. In healthy relationships, this loop operates smoothly. When touch or eye contact feels safe, the body releases oxytocin and serotonin, reinforcing the sense of comfort and trust. But when tension, fatigue, or unspoken conflict interferes, the same stimuli can trigger cortisol, instead producing subtle withdrawal or defensiveness. That's why so many women over 50 describe feeling present but disconnected. It's not a lack of love. It's a physiological miscommunication between body and brain. Research from Harvard Medical School found that as estrogen declines sensory receptors in the skin, especially those linked to pressure and warmth, become less sensitive. This means touch that once felt immediately soothing might now require longer, gentler stimulation before the brain registers it as pleasure. The problem is not emotional numbness, it's delayed signaling. Understanding this helps women avoid self-blame and adjust expectations realistically. When couples rebuild connection through mindful touch, longer hugs, slower caresses, steady eye contact, they activate the vagus nerve, a key regulator of calm and bonding. This nerve communicates directly with the heart and digestive system, signaling that it's safe to soften. The effect is cumulative. Repeated gentle contact trains the body to associate proximity with peace rather than tension. From a psychological standpoint, perception also determines vulnerability. The more accurately partners interpret each other's cues, the safer they feel expressing need or desire. For example, when a woman feels unseen, her brain increases activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, a region associated with social pain. But when she perceives genuine attention, like a steady gaze or a relaxed tone, endorphins rise, soothing that internal alarm. What you see, hear, and feel literally dictates whether your nervous system opens or shuts down. In my own clinical experience, I've observed that small sensory rituals, holding hands before sleep, maintaining gentle physical contact during difficult talks retrain emotional memory. Over time, the body learns to interpret closeness not as risk, but as reassurance. It's why couples who maintain daily physical affection tend to recover faster from stress and argue less intensely. When perception and safety align, intimacy stops being effortful. The body doesn't perform, it remembers. It knows that being close is not dangerous, but restorative. That is the essence of emotional security after 50, not chasing intensity, but rebuilding the quiet confidence that touch can heal. In the next section, we'll explore how these physiological and psychological responses come together to form a sustainable cycle of trust and desire, showing that lasting intimacy isn't lost with age, it's simply waiting to be rebalanced. 5. The trust cycle. Rebuilding desire through biological synchrony. Trust is not a feeling that appears out of nowhere. It is a biochemical state created by consistent hormonal alignment between two nervous systems. In midlife, when hormones fluctuate, that alignment weakens, making intimacy feel unpredictable. What used to feel effortless may now require conscious recalibration. But science shows that desire, safety, and bonding can be restored once this synchrony is reestablished. Let's start with the biology. In women, estrogen and oxytocin work together to support both emotional warmth and physical receptivity. In men, testosterone and vasopressin play parallel roles, driving desire while reinforcing commitment and protection. When these systems interact harmoniously, each partner's nervous system mirrors the other's signals. But when estrogen drops after menopause, oxytocin production falls as well, leaving touch and emotional cues less rewarding. The result is a subtle mismatch. One partner seeks closeness, while the other unconsciously withdraws, not from rejection, but from reduced sensory reward. Restoring synchrony means reteaching the body how to release bonding chemistry through intentional consistency. Simple rituals, shared meals, nightly check-ins, or even silent proximity reactivate oxytocin pathways. The key is frequency, not intensity. Neuroendocrinology studies show that regular low-stress connection elevates oxytocin more effectively than sporadic passion. Over time, this repetition stabilizes the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis, lowering cortisol and improving emotional regulation. From a psychological standpoint, rebuilding trust also requires predictability. The human brain craves patterns. Unpredictability activates the amygdala, signaling potential danger. When communication becomes erratic, the body remains on alert, suppressing desire. But when small dependable gestures like consistent affection, respectful tone, or active listening replace volatility, the parasympathetic system reclaims control. Desire then shifts from adrenaline-driven to oxytocin-driven, from urgency to serenity. Many of my patients in their 50s and 60s tell me that rediscovering intimacy feels like learning a new language. They're right, because physiologically it is. Midlife hormones alter the way your body interprets touch, tone, and presence. What used to trigger excitement may now signal overwhelm. Recognizing this allows couples to rebuild pleasure on updated terms, gentler, slower, but more resonant. Trust and desire form a feedback loop. The safer you feel, the more oxytocin your brain produces. The more oxytocin you release, the safer you feel. It's a self-reinforcing circuit, one that thrives on patience. This is why genuine intimacy after 50 often feels deeper. It's no longer fueled by novelty, but by the confidence that your body and heart can still synchronize through presence. When you understand that desire isn't a mystery, but a measurable, trainable system, everything changes. You stop chasing excitement and start cultivating resonance. In that resonance, the human body rediscovers its oldest truth. We are wired not just to seek pleasure, but to share calm. In the next section, we'll move from understanding to practical application, showing you how to apply these biological principles in daily life to reignite connection naturally and sustainably. Applying these principles doesn't require grand gestures or complicated techniques. It begins with awareness, recognizing that the body and brain are constantly communicating even in silence. Start by creating space for calm. Spend a few minutes each day breathing deeply with your partner, synchronizing your rhythm. This gentle act activates the vagus nerve, lowering heart rate and blood pressure, and over time teaches your nervous systems to associate proximity with safety rather than tension. Next, rebuild oxytocin gradually through consistency. Small, genuine touches, holding hands during conversation, gentle pressure on the back, or maintaining eye contact longer than usual can reawaken the body's natural bonding chemistry. Studies show that when these micro gestures are repeated regularly, cortisol levels drop and emotional openness increases. The goal isn't to spark intensity overnight, but to restore the reflex of calm connection that midlife stress often erodes. Anticipation should also become part of your rhythm. Slow your pace during physical and emotional exchanges. Allow pauses, maintain closeness without rushing. The brain interprets this delayed gratification as heightened reward, releasing dopamine more evenly and strengthening desire without exhaustion. The same principle applies to communication. Listen longer before replying. The act of waiting is a biological stimulant for empathy. Finally, practice mindful perception. When your partner speaks or touches you, take a moment to truly notice sensations, temperature, pressure, tone of voice. This anchors the body in the present and increases serotonin and endorphin activity, translating awareness into trust. Even a short daily ritual, sharing a 5-minute embrace before bed, can recalibrate hormonal synchrony and emotional tone within weeks. None of this is about trying harder. It's about tuning deeper. Your body already knows how to connect. You're simply reminding it of rhythms it once trusted. When biology and awareness meet, intimacy becomes less of an effort and more of a return to something deeply human, the calm, grounded pulse of mutual safety and desire. True intimacy after 50 isn't about performance. It's about understanding how your body communicates safety and desire. When oxytocin rises and stress hormones fall, trust returns and connection deepens. What men truly crave isn't novelty, but the calm confidence of a woman who feels balanced within herself. Every breath, every pause, every moment of stillness becomes a biological reminder that passion is still alive when hormones and emotions align. As you explore these 5 science-based approaches, remember, healing your intimacy is not about chasing youth, but restoring synchronization between 2 nervous systems. Your body already knows how to connect. It simply needs the right rhythm and patience to remember. If this message inspired you, share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your story. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe and help this community of women stay informed, confident, and connected. I'm Dr. Eliza Hart. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are not too late. This is where it begins.